Uta using the sarin gas. Are you using sarin gas with these people? Are you using sarin gas? Let me tell you a little something about. Are you using sarin gas? No, man. No, I'm not. Not using the sarin gas for anything. Are you using sarin gas? The last time I asked you, please cooperate. I don't have any sarin gas. Are you using sarin gas? No, no, sir, I'm not. I have no need for it. I don't even know what that is. Mm. Are you using? You want to know what though? I look back at my life, and I realize how much sports betting and gambling contributed to my life without me having anything to do with betting or gambling or anything like that. Back in the 80s, the home PC, the personal computer, became available. It was just a big giant calculator that can make 16 colors and, do complicated math. It could play, instead of one voice, it had three voices, so it would play music with using sine, square, triangle, and sawtooth waves. And you're like, oh my God, basic speech synthesis in a 4, 6, or 8-bit way would eat up an entire 5.5-inch floppy just to say Ghostbusters, shit like that. But my grandfather one year, because he had money, he didn't like to part with his money. But I'd like to go to his house because he always had nice toys. I could play with the bocce set. I could fuck with his shit, and he'd let me fuck with the computer. He bought the Commodore 64 computer when it became available, right after Apple, because it was supposed to be better and more affordable. It was about a little over $1,000 back then, I think. And he didn't have the disk drive yet because I don't even think they made those yet for the Commodore, at least. But he would load up these programs and go to these computer club shits, and he'd get all kinds of games for me that like companies would make or sometimes people would make. And what you had was a monaural cassette of computer information that you would load into your computer through a cassette with tones. And the computer would identify the tones and pull up a fucking program just from tones. That's acoustic coupling, and that's a strange science to begin with. But it would use cassettes to do that. And that was amazing to me. Just by playing tones into the computer. And if you played them on a normal stereo, it would sound like a V90 modem or something in the 90s. Then so that was fascinating to me because I was already into cassettes and sound and all that shit. And then came the disc drive, which was essentially that same type of thing. It was just magnetic sound information that was on magnetic tape in a 5.5-inch floppy, double density. He got the 1541 Commodore disk drive. You put discs in it. You could flip the disc over, and they stored so much more information than cassettes did. And you can get these elaborate games and play games like that. And that was just fascinating to me too. And then like the 80s gave way to the 90s. And I always wanted a modem, but they were so expensive back then. You would actually take your phone off the cradle and put it onto a big machine that would sonically, acoustically couple the sounds, detect tones, and make tones back to allow you to dial into bulletin boards, public services, other computers, college computers. And so by this point, it's starting to dawn on me that sound has a lot to do with computing. And then I realized that the phone system used tones to, because Ma Bell or Bell Atlantic and all the bells and Pacific Bell or whatever all wanted to. You've only got so many operators to serve 7 billion people. So they started making ESS switching equipment at the phone companies. And this happened before I was even born. But the premise was the same. Tones would control 60 to 70% of your phone activity. And so I came home from school one day in the early 90s, and I think I heard my brother-in-law talking about it. And then I seen some kids on the street, dude. He's like, "Do you ever hear of a red box?" Because it was red boxing in my day. You could say I'm from the 90s. In the 60s and 70s, it was the blue box. But the red box was a little handheld, about the size of your hand, unit. Now, I never got one. I couldn't get my hands on one. So I made one. But the red box, what it would do was it would play hook tones, off the hook tones, dual tone modulated frequencies, which is DTMF, or touch tone. And it would come out a little built-in speaker. And what you would do is, and it also had 5-cent, 10-cent, and quarter tones for payphones. And it would play those. And he's telling me about it. And I'm like, so you put this handheld device up to a payphone and you can get free calls? And he's like, yeah. And I didn't believe that because I'm like, there's no way that as a kid, I believed that there's no way that a phone system would be that cheap where it would use the voice and mechanical sounds as a switching technique. Is that to say you could whistle the tones? And you could. All you needed was the formula. Because they're 2-layer tones. You had 1500, 2600. You had different tones through a sine wave generator that would make the touch tone phones or send a call. And what you would do, what I did at that time, I took my phone, I put it into my Walkman, I held the fucking the hearing receiver up to the microphone, and I put in and I recorded all the touch tones. I then needed to get the 5, 10, and 25-cent sounds onto a tape and record it onto a Walkman, right? It's so hard telling the story. And so I went down the street to the nearest payphone, and then I put the microphone up to the earpiece of the payphone, put in 5 cents, pause the tape, put in 10 cents, pause the tape, put in 25 cents, came back to the house, and I listened back to what I had. I then reassembled the tape with the recording had on the old tape recorders and Walkmans, the Walkman recorder would have counters, 4-digit counters. And I'd say, okay, 010 is the 10-cent tone, 020 is a 25-cent tone. So I picked up the phone and I got a big pair of headphones and I played the tones back into the payphone. And it fucking worked. I started making free calls. Which was really great for me because I never had any money. And in order to get back into my apartment where I was living, I had to call the people there to come down and unlock the door. Because I had been climbing the fire escape all this time to get back into the fucking house that I didn't even live in. And then eventually they took the fire escape down. So this came out. And then in my city, they shut off the payphones at 9 o'clock at night. It would say, sorry, you can't make calls past 9 o'clock. But it would still work if I used the red box tones. I actually got arrested for this, but they never caught me. They caught me for something else. And that was amazing. And then by the time computers came out, I got my first computer, and I bought my first computer. I think it was in 1999. It was a IBM PC 166. It's like a Pentium 1, I think. But it was amazing to me because you could go online, and I used a credit card to go online and bill shit. I forget how I did it, but that just getting on the internet was because there was no free internet service then, a big deal. And I knew that if you I started downloading music programs for editing, and a lot of them would have sine wave generators built into the program. And so I dialed into Berkeley, and I got all the codes, which is just readily available information, but you got to know how to search it. And it would give you the formula and which sine wave generator or which sine wave tone to use to make up the formula. And usually you'd mix two sine wave tones and it would create a key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, star, pound, A, B, C, D, on hook, off hook, and shit like that. And to create and then I could create line in sounds, because to put tones into the phone is illegal. Yeah, to this day it is. You can only do it through the phone speaker or receiver. But I was able to use the Microsoft in-house dialer to do shit. And when it's line in, it's a perfect facsimile of what. And so I was just going crazy. And back in my day, there used to be, I'm trying to think what it was. It wasn't phonelosers.org, but it was like something like that where you can go and you can dial into trunk lines and get chat lines, basically, where there'd be 10 or 20 other people talking, and the furthest away you were, or the order you dialed in, that voice would be softer, and you'd have voices that were louder, that were closer to you. It was awesome. But all the gambling people just wanted it so that they could defeat a silver box or not have their calls traced. But yeah. I mean, just stupid shit like that. But isn't that ironic how tones and sound could control major public functions like a fucking telephone system where you could get calls for free? And eventually I was able to, when computers came out, it got even crazier because you can dial in strings. And it got to the point where I was just sitting in my room and I would pick up a phone, open up my dialer from the computer, and dial out large strings of shit. And you'd have to put in pauses to anticipate how long it was for the next command to be received. And you would just do it like that in an experiment. It's amazing. It's amazing. And you'd have to be the right distance from the speaker or the right volume. I could still do it on a fucking cell phone. I should do a demonstration sometime. Whereas you get an external sound source and you have it start dialing numbers out the speaker, and the phone will pick up and literally dial those numbers. But that's what I used it for in my day. Or you'd scan your line to see if there was any silver boxing or beige boxing or white boxing going on your line. Yeah. I could hack it. And then it worked really good in the 90s if all you had was like a pulse dialing phone. You know, right, right after rotary and right before touchtone, it was cheaper to get a pulse phone, and it looked like a touchtone, but it was just a rotary. It was a glorified rotary. You'd pick up and hit 3, it'd go hit 5. You're like, this isn't a touchtone, this is just a pulse dialer. But it's, I guess, it saved you doing this. And all my life, I collected rotary phones. I wish I still had them because they're worth a lot now. I had a red one, a green one. I had many black ones. And I would always do that. Instead of doing pulse or rotary dial, I would just pick up the phone, open up my computer, and just make a call that way. It was quicker, you know? Yep. See, in our day, there was no, when that shit, the last wave of that shit went on, most of us didn't have computers yet. And it wasn't so much of a geeky hobby. It was a hobby. If you wanted to talk to people, you had to socially engineer. You could pick up the phone and dial a stranger and socially engineer them into talking. Or if you get bored, you call up and fuck with the operators. You know? You try to get them to do things for you, or try to get them to give up information. I used to do weird shit like collect relay tones and collect relay messages and error messages. It's because I thought it was interesting. Back in my day, you pick up the phone and it'd be Darth Vader. It'd be, what's his name? Welcome to Bell Atlantic. Yeah. James Earl Jones it would be. And no kid nowadays knows what the fuck Bell Atlantic is or Pacific Bell. They're like, what's that? Like, you don't remember Bell Atlantic? This is a big deal. I grew up with the last of it. And some things never change. Remember that after Y2K, they tried to say that analog transmissions were over? Well, they were. They just started sending digital transmissions in an analogous fashion. There's still rabbit ears still exist. It's called your digital antenna tuner. I miss those days. The problem with technology is when other people take over your technology. It's like I think Steve Jobs said it. What's the first thing people take over? The military takes over when they invade countries or regions. They take over communication. The way you get communication, the way they take over the news, they fill you with propaganda. That's technology. The problems with technology now, especially the one I'm having, is that when someone is controlling your technology, they're controlling basically your news of the world. It's warfare. It's psychological warfare. There's nothing to do anymore because you got some other party that's so fucking interested in what you do. It's just a pain in the ass, really. I kind of miss those days. There ain't fuck all to do now. It's just like... And everybody's so scared, and everybody's so autistically scared of one another. This guy slid into my DMs. Oh my God, I did the unthinkable, and I reached out to someone I don't know on Facebook or something. You didn't? You were being social? Oh, that's creepy. God just sent me a message. Who are you? It's like, calm the fuck down. Don't you remember the early days of AOL even? You were encouraged to chat with strangers. You know what I mean? You didn't get any of that. You always used to get random messages from people. Hey, what is who the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Remember getting blasted with hey man, want a cyber? Hey baby, want a cyber? It's like I've never even seen you. Cyber sex and shit. Come on, put some effort into that catfishing. Show me a fake picture, son. Want a cyber? Internet pretty rock. wants to talk to you. Do you accept this message? I met him in a chat room. It's my boyfriend.